is an India Today exclusive. I'm being joined by world's topmost diplomat, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres. Many thanks for joining us here on India Today.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
You began your visit by going to the Taj Hotel and paying your respect to the victims of 26/11 attacks. And it comes at a time when India still has not got justice when it comes to perpetrators either being booked or being sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. The recent news of another individual's designation being blocked by China is a concern for India. How do you view the idea of good terrorists, bad terrorists, somebody's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist? The distinctions clearly are a problem in fighting and tackling terrorism, sir.
I think it's necessary to increase international cooperation in fighting terrorism. Terrorism became a global phenomenon. Terrorists are able to move from country to country, from area to area, from Afghanistan to Syria, from Syria to Libya, from Libya to the Sahel, then back to Yemen or Afghanistan. And they use the most sophisticated instruments. Unfortunately, we do not have yet enough international cooperation in relation to fighting against terrorism and in relation to creating the conditions for effective accountability. That is the reason why my first reform when I became Secretary General was the creation of the Office of Counterterrorism. And today the Office has a meaningful capacity to cooperate with Member States and to support Member States, especially in training, in advice, in relation to counterterrorism policies and in relation to the prevention of violent extremism that sometimes is the root of terrorist activities. But we need more international cooperation and we need more accountability.
You spoke about the counterterrorism architecture that has been put in place, but the United Nations and the world is yet to decide on a definition of terrorism itself. In such a scenario, do you think there are challenges in the existing architecture of counterterrorism itself?
There is a problem indeed to have a consensus on the definition of terrorism, and that has to do with politics. But we all know what terrorism is, so that does not, in my opinion, make it difficult for us to work together effectively against terrorism. What we need is, as I said, much more international cooperation in the fight against terrorism, and we cannot accept the geopolitical divides to make the fight against terrorism kind of in different compartments, because the terrorists are global, so we need to have a global response. And the problems that exist in relation to the definition are problems that have to do with, I would say, some internal questions in some states, but that is not a reason not to be effective in fighting terrorism.
Your second stint, this is your first visit to India after taking over for the second time. And your second stint is riddled with challenges. Let's begin.
The first one was not simple too.
True that. But unprecedented moments of history, Russia-Ukraine war being one. In terms of the kind of decisions that Russia has taken of incorporating 4 key parts of Ukraine into their territory, is negotiation or a negotiated settlement anywhere near in the future, or are we looking at a very long-drawn conflict?
I do not expect that we have a quick political solution of this problem. I think both sides are convinced that they will win, and I think that for the moment the possibility of cessation of hostilities and the political negotiation is not in sight. Of course, that doesn't mean that people should not work for that, but realistically, I'm not expecting it to happen in the short term. That is why we have concentrated our efforts as United Nations in trying to seize all opportunities to build trust or to address problems that can be solved independently of the war. I mean, as you know, after visiting President Putin and President Zelensky, we had an initiative of the UN to manage the liberation of the civilians that were in Azovstal, and then we have been working to create conditions to have the export of food products from the Ukraine through the Black Sea Initiative, and at the same time we are working hard with the Americans, with Europeans, and with other countries that have imposed sanctions on Russia to make sure that Russian food and fertilizers can have unimpeded access to world markets, and we need them. So this is the kind of thing in which we have been talking to both sides and trying to offer our good offices to solve the problems that reduce suffering in the Ukraine and suffering around the world. But peace is still, in my opinion, a bit far away.
Peace is a bit far away, but what about the nuclear threat? Is it real? You've been engaging Russia, you've been engaging Ukraine. Is the threat real, or is Russia only warning against NATO's entry into Ukraine?
If one reads the Russian nuclear security doctrine, what is said in the security doctrine, and this was invoked by the Kremlin spokesman recently, does not foresee the use of nuclear weapons related to this conflict or to what is happening and might happen in this conflict. So my deep belief is that there is no way we can accept the possibility, even the possibility, of the use of nuclear weapons in today's world.
India's role. Now, India's role has been criticized a lot, sir, by the West in the position it has taken in the Russia-Ukraine war. But the West also looks at its own interests, strategic interests as well. Do you think in this changing scenario, how is your office engaged, or how do you view countries that are looking at Russia-Ukraine war different from the West or from Europe?
We are not judges. No. I mean, our role is to promote dialogue. Our role is to promote understanding. And at the same time, our role is to defend the values of the Charter. I am Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm not Secretary General of a Western country or of India or of Russia or of the United Nations. And the United Nations has a Charter, and the Charter has values. And one of the values is the preservation of the territorial integrity of a country, of all countries. And obviously, when that territorial integrity was violated, I thought it was my duty to denounce it. But having said so, it's also my role to work and to have an open, frank dialogue with the parties to the conflict and with all other countries, each one looking into the conflict through its national perspectives. But as I said, our role is not to be the judge of the behavior of others. Our role is to do our best to solve the problems that we can solve and to create the conditions for one day a political solution in line with the values of the Charter to be possible.
Many are questioning the relevance of the United Nations as a body, as an organization that can affect change. Do you foresee a future for United Nations in an expanded form with more reforms, India playing an important role? In the global changing order, do you see India and many other countries actually be part of an expanded P5?
Well, first of all, the United Nations is not the Security Council. The United Nations is a constellation of different organizations that today play a very important role in the world. India is the largest contributor for peacekeeping missions. Peacekeeping is saving lives in many parts of the world, and that's the United Nations. Half of the humanitarian aid that is provided internationally, half of it is provided through UNHCR, UNICEF, World Food Programme, and that is the United Nations in action. And in many other aspects in relation to nuclear security, with the role of our agency for atomic energy, in food security, with World Food Programme, fighting famine all over the world. I mean, the United Nations is doing lots of very important things. And then we have the bodies that represent member states. And of course, the attention is focused on the Security Council. The Security Council is today paralyzed by geopolitical divides, and the Security Council corresponds to the geography of the world and to the politics of the world after the Second World War. this is no longer the case. And obviously the Security Council has a problem of, I would say, relationship with the present world. That is why the reform of the Security Council is extremely important. And I would say that for the first time in the last General Assembly, there was an important step forward. Because some of the P5, crucial elements of the P5, I believe France and the UK have always been relatively open to a reform of the Security Council. But the three biggest ones were very reluctant. But we heard the President of the United States saying that it would make sense to have another country from Latin America, another country from Asia, and another country from Asia as permanent members of the Security Council. And I heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia saying that Brazil and India would be welcome as permanent members of the Security Council. So I strongly hope that it will be possible. It will take time, it will be complex. Let's be honest, there are other divisions that make it sometimes a bit complicated because not all countries agree on who should represent this or that. But I believe that the door is open for a serious discussion that has never happened to start, and I hope that the door will be open for a reform of the Security Council to make it correspond to today's world. And obviously India is today one of the two countries, if not the country with the largest population. Sometimes there is a discussion on that. I don't want to enter into that. It is the fastest growing economy in the world, is a fundamental pillar of what I believe is essential. What I believe is essential is a multipolar world, because only with a multipolar world we will have the possibility of multilateral effective governance.
Your officers are asking me to end the interview, but I really need to squeeze this question in. You are the moral compass. United Nations is the moral compass when it comes to the rights of women, equality, gender equality, so on and so forth. The recent protests in Iran really has started a revolution of imposition of any kind of patriarchal norms, whether it is dress code to wear or not to wear. In Iran, it is about hijabs, women not wanting to wear hijabs. In the free world, certain countries in Europe, including in India, there are hijab bans. What is your opinion about patriarchal norms, systems being thrusted upon women, whether they wish to wear or not wear? Hijab or hijab ban?
We live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture. And our obligation is to fight that. And that is why, because this is a question of power, it is important. Power usually is not given. It needs to be taken. It's time for women to take the power to be able to live as they want in any society, only respecting what is necessary to be respected in order for other women also to be respected in that different approach. I mean, not all women have to dress the same way, not all women have to... I mean, we need a world in which women must be the masters of themselves and the masters of the way they are present in society.
My final question, because you're going to launch the mission Life with Prime Minister Modi, just wanted to know, do you think that the world is ready to deliver on climate change?
Not. The world is not ready. The world is not delivering. We are losing this battle. And that is why this initiative is important, because we need a bottom-up approach. We need each one of us to assume our responsibilities in our behavior in relation to climate change, in order also to demand to governments, in order to demand to companies, in order to demand to other key actors that they also behave, and that we are able to avoid the climate catastrophe for which we are sleepwalking without effective conscience in the world, that this is the defining issue of our time.
This is indeed the defining issue of our times. Many thanks for joining us here on India Today, sir. Indeed a pleasure.
Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you. That's world's top diplomat speaking exclusively to India Today.